And another film begins over on BBC1 in 25 minutes when Lee Majors and Robert Mitchum star in a psychological thriller set in the world of advertising. Strange and bizarre stories start to emerge in Agency.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
It's back live and 4 nights a week.
Can I talk to you about the American Late Show?
I've always said there's always a lot of talent in prison.
Tokyo has emerged as a dominant world capital, but you wouldn't know it to look at it.
Cause it's a hard life, it's a hard life, it's a very hard life. It's a hard life wherever you go.
It has for me no beauty.
So I have to tell you that the winner is...
The Late Show returns Monday at 11:15.
Alexander Nevzorov presents 600 seconds of crime news in 50 minutes with the last programme in our season of films about Leningrad. Now on BBC2 Newsnight with Jeremy Paxman.
The Yugoslavs are still burying their dead on the eve of the European Community Peace Conference. What chance it'll bring peace? Good evening. One European Community Peace Initiative after another has run into the sands in Yugoslavia. The essential precondition for this one, laid down by Lord Carrington, that the fighting should have stopped, has not been met. Is there any chance of tomorrow's peace conference getting anywhere? The Portuguese Foreign Minister, soon to assume the leadership of the Community Foreign Ministers, joins us from The Hague. In Russia today, they recognized the independence of the Baltic states, another indication of the way the coup planned to consolidate the communist empire ended in its disintegration.
From Moscow tonight, we've a special report. I'll be telling the secret story of how Boris Yeltsin beat the coup, talking to the soldiers and KGB men who turned their backs on hardline communism and sided with democracy.
A month before, the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, warned me that we had to be ready for anything. So, energetically, and without telling anybody, a small circle of us, that is our defense committee, started making plans in case there was a coup.
And how did this style of policing on an Oxford housing estate end up in scenes like this? The most incorrigible optimist would be hard put to express any confidence that peace is about to break out in Yugoslavia. As leaders of the combatants arrived in The Hague this evening for the European Community's Peace Conference tomorrow, few of them were being very upbeat. The Yugoslav Prime Minister Ante Markovic said earlier that the European community may have to send peacekeeping troops if the conference doesn't succeed. Most of the community dreads that invitation. But already the first condition which Lord Carrington said was necessary, a ceasefire, has been ignored, although things are a little quieter tonight. But what hope is there that the peace talks will get anywhere at all? If nothing else, the conference will help sustain a common European line on the crisis. There have been well-publicized divisions within community ranks. The Germans have been arguing for the recognition of Croat and Slovene independence and said today that recognition would definitely happen if the talks failed. For their part, the French have been asking for a European peacekeeping force to be sent in. A peace conference was something everyone could agree on. But look at the jamboree it threatens to be. Lord Carrington will be in the chair. All 12 EC foreign ministers will be there, as well as the Dutch Prime Minister Ruud Lubbers and 2 members of the European Commission. There'll also be 1 representative from the European Political Cooperation Organization and 1 from the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. The Yugoslav delegation will consist of all 8 members of the Federal Presidency and the leaders of the 6 republics. The conference will appoint a 5-member arbitration commission to settle the various ethnic disputes.
We hope that as soon as the enemies, because they are enemies, are sitting down around the table, when back in their countries, they will respect the ceasefire.
We shall assess the situation. If we can't silence the gun, let the guns not silence us anyhow.
Those guns have been at their loudest around the towns along the main Zagreb-Belgrade road, a crucial communications line for the Croats to keep open. The Serbs have also been bombarding the town of Osijek. At least 6 people were killed and 18 injured yesterday. A new battle began this morning. The fighting there highlights the first of the many problems the community's peace process faces. Increasingly, units of the Yugoslav Federal Army are joining with Serbian irregulars to fight the Croat defense forces. Croats in Osijek claim they're also targeting civilians.
22 dead people were brought here for the pathologic analysis. They were killed 2 days ago near Podravska Slatina, 65 miles from here. They are massacred in their villages, in their houses, in 3 villages.
Further west in the town of Okokani, some of the most intense battles have taken place. Croat forces have come under severe pressure from Serbian separatists who won't be represented at the peace conference. Today, their leaders said the community's conference was illegitimate. That's another problem for the would-be peacemakers. Can any lasting peace be hammered out without the Serbian separatists?
The Serbs in Croatia are intensifying their campaign against the Croat troops and police in order to get more territories for tomorrow when the peace conference in Netherlands begins. The army is supporting them with artillery, armor, even with airstrikes.
The question is, what difference can a conference make? The Croats may judge recognition of their independence will come quicker if the fighting continues. For their part, the Serbs, confident of their overwhelming military superiority, can afford a certain disdain. The omens don't look good. Well, joining us now from The Hague, the site of tomorrow's peace conference, is Professor João de Deus Pinheiro, who is the Portuguese Foreign Minister. Professor Pinheiro, what are your expectations tomorrow?
Well, I hope that everybody will show their willingness to find a proper solution for this conflict, at least to start the negotiations. I think that everybody recognizes that a full stop must be put to this conflict because too many people have been killed and there is no way whatsoever in which the international community will accept gains of territory by military means.
So are you saying that the European community's position as a whole is that we stand by all the existing borders?
Absolutely, unless all the parties peacefully and through dialogue decide that they want to change their borders.
Well, then why are we suggesting that there be these 5 arbitration figures to settle territorial disputes? That implies they're negotiable.
Well, it's because there are many issues at stake in these peace negotiations and on the future of Yugoslavia. And these 5 people that are being arbiters in this situation is people with some basic good knowledge on constitutional matters, on legal matters, say they will assist the presidency of the conference in order to solve or try to solve some of the more complex issues. Let us not forget that it's not simply a question of borders. It will be possibly afterwards a question of dividing the goods that they have been sharing so far, deciding on things like foreign debt, deciding on things like the contracts that are on a long-term basis, and many others. And therefore, arbitration would be required.
Now, the German Foreign Minister, Hans-Dietrich Genscher, says that if this conference doesn't succeed, then we ought to be in the business of recognizing Croatia. Is it your judgment that that is a judgment which would be shared by most of the European community?
Well, I think that we should stick to the position that we hope that all the Yugoslavs will define by themselves what is the best course of action. And if it's according to the book, in international terms, that we should accept whatever solution is found. But we have to reckon that if this conference fails, that other course of action have to be sought. And among them, of course, that's one of the possibilities, yes.
Okay, so how long do we give this conference?
Well, I think as long as there is a possibility of obtaining a solution through this peaceful dialogue, we will exhaust all the possibilities. I think that we should not set a deadlock or a timetable with accuracy for this thing, because it's a political discussion that we will have to be on the table, will be on the table.
But there are an awful lot of people going to be in The Hague, already in The Hague tonight, an awful lot of people sitting around that table. How long do you expect them to stay there?
Well, to be honest, I think that the situation, the economic situation in Yugoslavia is such that the Yugoslavians cannot manage by themselves unless they find first a solution, second a good help and a good helping hand from the community. So I think in the end, possibly it will be the economic pressure that will speed up all these sort of negotiations. But several months is in my opinion.
But there has been an expectation right from the start of the European community's involvement in Yugoslavia that somehow economic pressure would stop the fighting. It has failed to do so. Is it really wise for the community as a whole to be taking this higher profile?
Well, I think that we have no other option, because if we fail, who else can play this role? And I think that it is so important for the European community and for Europe and for the world to prevent this kind of domino effect that may arise from this secession, dissociation, emergence of nationalisms, of ethnic rivalries, that we must do everything in our possibilities to try to help solve this problem. It is a must for us.
And if the Yugoslav federal authorities were then to say, this peace conference has not succeeded, we are grateful to the European community for their good efforts, would you now please send European community troops? Should we go that far?
No, I don't think so. I think that we must reject as a principle military intervention unless there is a real threat to our own countries or territories or population, which is not the case. Otherwise, with which right would we be intervening in Yugoslavia? No, I think that should be clearly said. That is out of the question.
Professor Pinheiro, thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is still less than 3 weeks since the hardliners in the Kremlin staged their attempt to roll the tanks over perestroika. With their failure, the edifice they were trying to shore up has fallen apart. Communism, Boris Yeltsin told American television viewers last night, was a tragic experiment which failed. Today, the first act of the new supreme authority in what until yesterday was called the Soviet Union was to recognize the independence of Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia. The independent Interfax news agency reports too that Russia has agreed that Leningrad should revert to being St. Petersburg. 14 people, government and party officials, KGB and army officers, have been arrested in connection with the coup, according to the Russian state prosecutor. They face sentences of 10 to 15 years in prison or the death penalty. Newsnight's Mark Urban has been in Moscow throughout the dramatic events of the last few weeks. They caught the rest of the world by surprise, but not, it seems, the President of Russia.
Заявление советского руководства. В связи с невозможностью по состоянию...
In the early hours of an August morning, the people of Moscow awoke to the proclamations of desperate men.
И переходом в соответствии со статьей 127.7 Конституции...
Their aim was to derail democracy and preserve the Soviet Union. Their principal power lay in the armoured divisions which complicit generals were calling into action. At 5:30 on the morning of Monday the 19th, the men here at the Taman Guards Motor Rifle Division received a highly unusual order. They were to take their tanks and other armoured vehicles out of barracks and towards Moscow. At other barracks around the city, other units were stirring. The Kantemirov Armoured Division, the 106th Guards Airborne and the Dzerzhinsky Divisions. But it was the orders given to the 2nd Guards, the Taman Division, which would place them in the most critical position of any unit.
Well, essentially it was like this. We got our orders to go to Moscow, and after that, we knew at once that something wasn't quite right. We'd never had orders like that before. Our vehicles had never been on the streets of Moscow.
With units of the Taman and other divisions heading into Moscow, their commanders reviewed their orders. The desire to let as few people into the plot as possible, and the belief, perhaps, that most people would welcome the troops, meant their leaders were given only the most basic orders.
We received the order on the morning of the 19th to deploy some of the division into Moscow, to guard several specified objectives. The division was deployed and started protecting these objectives. We served there for 3 days.
Don't kill the people. Don't attack the people. What are you people doing?
You are killing your own people. Can you really crush us? Don't listen to orders.
We have rules. We don't discuss orders. We just have to obey them.
At the Parliament of the Russian Republic, known locally as the White House, Boris Yeltsin and his aides confronted the first tanks of the Taman division. Hundreds, then thousands of people arrived, rallying to the defense of their democracy and galvanized by the sight of their president.
Whatever the circumstances that may serve as an excuse for the removal, we're dealing with a right-wing, reactionary and anti-constitutional coup.
Without Yeltsin, it was difficult to resist, because our contemplations were before that, of course, a kind of a coup d'etat may take place. But army is not reliable, not for Gorbachev if he is instigator, or for anybody else if the coup d'etat is against Gorbachev. And presence of Yeltsin and actions of Yeltsin are important, because we may count that many of military people would follow Yeltsin, not military commander.
Very, very different people came here, in fact. People of middle-aged, of the generation of the 60s, who kind of are always on pro-Yeltsin's demonstrations. And what was new, that many young people were here also.
With the Russian president's supporters surrounded by tanks, the battle lines were drawn. But Newsnight has learnt that weeks before the coup, Boris Yeltsin and his supporters had begun secret moves which were to have a key effect on the emerging confrontation. At the beginning of August, Alexander Yakovlev, Perestroika's chief ideologist, had resigned as advisor to President Gorbachev. He'd been dismayed by the president's move to the right earlier this year. Yakovlev's sense of what was about to happen was to be proved right.
When I gave him serious warning, he showed no reaction. And it turned out that I was correct about the right-wing action being prepared by hardline forces. A month before the coup, I had written a draft speech for the Congress of the Democratic Movement. In my statement of August 16th, I mentioned the counter-revolutionary coup which was being prepared. Alas, it turned out to be an accurate prophecy. Well, that's the way it was.
Boris Yeltsin was so concerned about the increasing outspokenness of hardliners that he succeeded in having the elections for the presidency of Russia brought forward. As soon as he defeated his rivals at the polls, he appointed security advisors, and almost as soon as he'd done that, he gave them sensitive instructions.
Месяц назад президент России Борис Николаевич Ельцин меня предупредил.
A month before, the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, warned me that we had to be ready for anything. So, energetically, and without telling anybody, a small circle of us, that is, our Defence Committee, started making plans in case there was a coup and the Parliament building was besieged. Our forecast was right. We understood things correctly. And that's why we were able to endure those difficult hours in a pretty well-organized manner.
In the weeks before the coup, Yeltsin had successfully forced the central bureaucracy into allowing the creation of a Russian KGB headquarters inside the Lubyanka. From the outset, he wanted the 20 members of this new intelligence cell to be loyal to the new power in Russia rather than the old.
An example of this growing polarization was the first all-Russian conference of senior KGB officers, which was held on the 18th and 19th of July, 1 month before the coup. It was there that we expressed in full detail for the first time our view of the situation and our opinion about certain threats. We stated quite unequivocally that we should completely abolish the principle of Communist Party control, and that instead we should base ourselves on the law and the legal authority.
Several weeks after that conference, Major General Ivanenko's deputy here at the Lubyanka set about subverting the coup. He sent telegrams to KGB units all over the country, urging them to follow the line of Boris Yeltsin and the Russian KGB.
Our regional branches found themselves in an ambiguous position. The then KGB chief, Vladimir Khrushchev's people, were putting them under pressure. They wanted the branches to give their immediate support to the emergency committee. We were flouting their decrees and telling the branches to follow the orders of the Russian KGB. You asked me whether I ever feared for my own life. I can answer. Before sending the telegram clearly expressing the view of the Russian KGB, it never crossed our minds to worry about our own lives. But when the telegrams were sent, some people and some departments immediately rang KGB headquarters to say that the Russian KGB was sending out these frank telegrams. Then people started looking at us rather differently.
At the White House, soldiers were also being asked to choose sides. The commander of the Taman Division's 1st Tank Battalion was in charge of the 10 T-72s around the building. He'd already made up his mind to refuse any order to shoot civilians.
Somehow I was sure that I wouldn't be given an order to shoot peaceful civilians. But the thoughts running through my head were to the effect that even if because of some set of circumstances I should get that order, then I, personally, would not give the order to fire.
As the tank crews came into contact with people around the Russian parliament, they were won round to the idea of defending it.
I remember everything. How happy people were that we were not against them. They understood that we are the same sort of people as they are. Fight them? How? It would have been impossible. They gave us flowers. They tried to shake our hands joyfully. They wanted to take photos with us near the tank.
Unit commanders began to understand that the coup leaders had placed them in an impossible position.
I think we were touched and began to change our minds. Of course, I didn't tell anyone particularly on the 19th, but on the 20th, things started happening. I changed my views and also my conduct as commander of the division.
I call on you to remain calm and not to provoke any act.